I've been messing around with this for the past few weeks, and safe to say, it does have its similarities to this. So in today's video, I do a comparison of sorts between these two and give you my thoughts on it. Let's get into it. Since I only own the plastic variants, that's exactly what I'll be comparing. The Crystal Eye dripper is definitely a slightly larger dripper as compared to the Hario V60. It's slightly wider and a bit heavier. This difference makes the Crystal Eye feel a bit sturdier and a bit more premium. It also allows it to retain heat a bit better, but definitely not as good as a ceramic or glass brewer. While not as bulky as something like a Chemex, it's definitely a lot less space efficient. The Crystal Eye has a slightly wider ring at the bottom, which can make swirling just the cone alone a bit tricky with smaller brewing vessels. Now, one thing that I wish the Crystal Eye had was a handle at the side like the V60s. It makes maneuvering the brewer a lot easier. Instead, it has a lip at the top which gives it an odd center of gravity, making it tip like this when it's picked up. While it isn't a huge issue, it just makes it a little less ergonomically friendly. Despite this, it's still fairly manageable. If you're used to brewing with a ceramic brewer, you should have no real issues getting used to the Crystal Eye. To my knowledge, the Crystal Eye comes in two variants, glass and plastic, and for obvious reasons, both are transparent. On the other hand, the V60 has quite a few colors to choose from, so if you're concerned about looks, then do take this into consideration. The Crystal Eye comes with its own set of filter papers. In terms of size, it's similar to that of Hario's size 02 papers, minus the ever so useful lip at the top. As mentioned before, it's marketed as being precision fit, but in practice, it just doesn't really sit all that well in a cone. It's a lot thinner and smoother as compared to Hario's and has a slightly different pattern. I personally prefer using thicker filter paper, and thankfully, the V60s fits perfectly in the brewer, even more so than Timemore's. They are also likely to be more easily available, so the added convenience is always a plus point. Both brewers brew using the percolation method. This basically means we are brewing by slowly passing water through a bed of ground coffee. Also, if you haven't already realized, this is used for filter coffee. If you're a bigger fan of immersion style brewing, then maybe the French press might be a better choice for you. Now, where they differ is that inside their cones, they have pretty different patterns. The V60 has a clockwise spiral made up of lines that go from top to bottom and a few smaller lines in between. The Crystal Eye, on the other hand, has straight lines mimicking that of a crystal. It also has notches and grooves along the side of its walls. I had some predictions and interesting observations as I brewed with these, but to better illustrate this, let's brew some coffee. To keep things consistent, I brewed these two cups using the same amount of coffee and water. The only difference being, I used Timemore's filter paper for the Crystal Eye and I used Hario's for the V60. I initially expected the V60 to brew a bit slower than the Crystal Eye, as I assumed that the swirls might slow down the flow of water as compared to straight lines. However, what happened was the opposite, with the Crystal Eye brewing slightly slower. In hindsight, this probably made a bit more sense as whirlpools tend to drain liquids faster. And we are back with two freshly brewed cups of coffee, one by the V60 and one using the Timemore dripper. I'm going to put these down first so I don't spill anything. Also, for those of you wondering, I'm using coffee from Perk, which is my usual subscription, and today we'll be using a WeAreNotChefs bean, which is a lighter roast and comes from Ethiopia. So with that out of the way, let's try some coffee. So let's start with the coffee brewed with the V60, because that's what most people are familiar with, and that's the dripper I've been using for the longest time. As expected, that's a very good cup of coffee. It has good mouthfeel, good texture, good body, the right balance of sweetness and acidity, overall very juicy, a lot of fruity notes. It's not that floral due to the type of bean, it's actually more fruity, a bit more syrupy, overall very well balanced and very delicious. Let's try the second cup. So the cup brewed with the Timemore dripper is noticeably different. It's definitely a lot cleaner, but not as juicy and big as the first cup. It also brings out a bit more of the acidity while mellowing down a bit on the sweetness. So I would say it's almost a bit tea-like. For those of you who enjoy a cup of coffee that's a bit lighter, a bit thinner, a bit cleaner, or even people who enjoy drinking tea and want to sort of start drinking coffee, the Timemore dripper may be the right brewer for you. As for those of you who want a cup of coffee that's a bit bigger, a bit juicier, something a bit more syrupy, something with a bit more sweetness, then the V60 is right up your alley. Also, with that in mind, the V60 may be a better choice when it comes to brewing iced coffee because the coffee it produces is a bit more syrupy, a bit more viscous, and when you pour the hot coffee over ice, it sort of dilutes it and thins it out a bit. If you were to use the Timemore dripper for iced coffee, the resulting cup may end up a bit too clean, a bit too thin, a bit too one note, almost like cold brew coffee, which would be a waste if you're using specialty beans. Either that, or you might have to use a darker roast to ensure the ensuing cup has a bit more body. Regardless, both brewers are pretty decent and it really boils down to personal preference. As for myself, I would probably alternate between the two just because I can and also to break the monotony of using a singular brewer. With that being said, that's pretty much all for today. If you enjoyed the video or learned something new, hit that like button if you liked the video, share it with all your friends and family, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. Also, let me know in the comments down below what are some of your favorite coffee beans and what are some of your favorite coffee brewers. But for now, I'll say thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next video.